They said I'd never make it without them. You're too soft for the real world. My brother laughed. I moved out that night. 3 years later, I walked into the reunion and... You ever have a moment where someone says something so cutting, so absurdly confident in your failure, that it wakes something inside you? That was me, sitting at the head of the long oak dining table that had seen every birthday, holiday, and silent dinner filled with veiled insults for as long as I could remember. My fork was halfway to my mouth when my brother, Derek, leaned back in his chair with that same smug grin he'd been wearing since high school and said, "You're too soft for the real world." Everyone laughed. Everyone. Even my father, who normally kept his emotions wrapped tighter than a rusted vice, cracked a grin over his mashed potatoes. My mother didn't look up. She never did. Her silence was the wallpaper of my childhood. I didn't respond. Not right away. I stared down at my plate, roast beef, green beans, gravy bleeding into everything. That gravy kind of matched how I felt in that moment. Spread too thin. Getting into places I didn't belong. Derek clinked his glass with a butter knife and went on. "I'm serious, man. You're a dreamer. Always reading your little books, talking about changing the world. It's cute. But out there? The world eats guys like you for breakfast." I scanned the faces around the table. No one objected. My father was already talking about some contractor he was hiring for a new warehouse. My sister rolled her eyes like she wanted the dinner to end so she could go back to her friends. And my mother, well, she refilled my dad's glass. That was her role, fill the silence, never question the king. So I stood up. Calmly. Quietly. My chair didn't even scrape the floor. I folded my napkin and laid it beside my plate, heart pounding so hard it felt like it echoed in my ears. "You okay?" Derek asked, all mock concern. I didn't look at him. I just said, "Yeah. I think I'm done." I left that night. I didn't pack a suitcase. Didn't slam a door. I just walked out. No one followed me. And that, more than the insult, told me everything I needed to know. I didn't cry when I left. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel anger, not the loud kind, anyway. What I felt was quieter. Deeper. Like a tide turning under my skin. That night, I ended up on a friend's couch. Marcus. We hadn't spoken in a while. He was one of those guys who text on your birthday, maybe send a meme every few weeks. But he opened his door the second I showed up. Didn't ask questions. Just tossed me a blanket and said, "Crash here as long as you need." I stayed for 6 weeks. Marcus was a bartender, lived in a studio with no air conditioning and the thinnest walls in the city. I could hear the guy upstairs practicing trombone every afternoon. But I slept better on that lumpy couch than I ever had under my parents' roof. During the day, I worked wherever I could. I flipped burgers, restocked shelves, even spent a week as a mall Santa assistant, don't ask. At night, I taught myself how to build things. Not with wood and nails like Dad had always wanted. With code. I found a dusty old laptop in a pawn shop and bought it for $80. It ran hot and wheezed every time I opened more than 3 tabs, but it worked. I dove into free online tutorials like they were oxygen. JavaScript, HTML, Python, business strategy, branding. It didn't matter what it was, I absorbed it all. The days turned into months. The months into a year. No one from my family called. Not once. And in a strange way, that helped. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It became a blank canvas. No more voice in my head telling me I couldn't. No more shadow over my shoulder whispering I'd never be enough. Just me. And the work. I started freelancing. Small jobs, fixing websites, optimizing landing pages, managing online stores for small shops that couldn't afford real agencies. Then I had an idea. A niche software tool for independent sellers. Something simple, but useful. I launched it. It flopped. No users, no interest, barely any clicks. My savings were gone. I was 2 weeks from sleeping in my car. But I didn't stop. Instead, I studied every failed click, every closed tab, every bounce. I learned. I adapted. And then I rebuilt. 3 months later, the second version launched. The difference? This time it hit. I'll never forget the morning I woke up and saw the first spike in users. Then a few more. Then one went viral on a niche subreddit. Suddenly, I had thousands of users. Then tens of thousands. Then funding offers. My little side hustle turned into a startup. My startup turned into a company. I never told my family. I didn't need their applause. I had something better, proof. Every login, every dollar, every success, proof that they were wrong. And I hadn't even gotten started. By the time my company crossed its first million in revenue, I'd moved into a loft downtown with exposed brick and high ceilings. The kind of place Derek would have called hipster garbage, if he could afford it. I'd built muscle. Not for them, for me. It started as stress relief, turned into routine. Clean food, cold showers, early mornings. There was no transformation montage, no cinematic reveal. Just quiet, disciplined repetition. The kind they never thought I had in me. Then one morning, an email came through. The subject line read, Reunion June 11th RSVP by May 1st. It was from my cousin Liz. She was always the neutral one. Switzerland in the battlefield of family politics. Apparently, she was organizing the annual Carter Family Summer Reunion. An event I'd ignored every year since leaving. Picnics. Lawn chairs. Forced laughter. The same people who hadn't lifted a finger the night I walked out, passing casseroles and pretending things weren't broken. But this time? This time, I clicked yes. Not because I needed revenge. Not because I needed them to clap. Because I had outgrown the part of me that still needed their approval, and that's exactly why I was going. I didn't tell anyone. Not Liz. Not Marcus. Not even my assistant. I ordered a tailored black suit, the kind that makes silence feel heavy in a room. I called in a favor from a friend at a dealership and arranged for a sleek, black Lucent Mirage GT to be delivered to my building that morning. V8 engine, matte finish, doors that open like wings. Subtle? Not at all. But symbolic? Perfect. I circled the date on my calendar and waited. 3 years of silence, of grit, of rising from the ashes they left me in, and now I was going back, not as the soft little brother they once mocked, but as the storm they never saw coming. The reunion was held at my aunt and uncle's place, an old colonial on 3 acres just outside town. Big yard, white tent, folding chairs, buffet tables groaning with potato salad and ribs. Same as it ever was. I pulled up around noon, the car humming like a threat. People turned. A few stopped mid-bite. Conversations trailed off. The Lucent Mirage GT glided into view like it didn't belong anywhere near folding chairs and lawn darts. I stepped out slowly, sunglasses on, black suit crisp in the summer heat. I wasn't trying to be flashy. Okay, maybe a little, but it wasn't about the car or the clothes. It was about walking in as a man they wouldn't recognize. Derek spotted me first. He was near the grill, beer in hand, flanked by a few cousins like a general with loyal foot soldiers. He squinted. I could see the disbelief trying to rearrange itself across his face. Then came the smirk. Well, well, he called out, loud enough for half the yard to hear. Look who finally decided to crawl back. I took my time walking toward him. My heart wasn't racing. My hands didn't shake. I felt calm. More than that, ready? Hey, Derek, I said, my voice even. Didn't want to miss the annual we pretend to be a functioning family event. A few people chuckled under their breath. He didn't. His eyes darted to my suit, the watch on my wrist, the car still purring behind me. What's with the outfit? He said, sipping his beer. Didn't realize this was black tie. No, I said. But I figured it might be the last time we're all together before the dominoes fall. That caught him. A flicker of something passed across his face. Confusion? Fear? I gave a tight smile. Thought I'd dress for the occasion. Then I turned and nodded to my aunt, hugged Liz, shook a few hands. I didn't need a crowd. Not yet. Just enough whispers to start stirring the air. Enough presence to let the room breathe me in. Derek tried to laugh it off, turning to the cousins beside him. Man thinks he's a Bond villain now. But I saw it, his posture had shifted. His confidence had hairline cracks. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know how deep it ran. It didn't take long for word to spread. I was the phantom cousin for 3 years, the one they whispered about, assumed was still broke or off finding himself. Now I'd shown up in a car they couldn't name, wearing confidence like armor, calm and quiet in the middle of their comfort zone. That alone unsettled them more than if I'd made a scene. They didn't know where to put me anymore. My Aunt Kathy leaned in during lunch and asked, "So, what have you been up to?" I smiled. "Building." She waited for more. I gave her nothing. That was enough to keep the mystery alive. But Derek couldn't leave it alone. He came up behind me later, clapped a hand on my shoulder harder than necessary. "You still doing that coding hobby or whatever?" he said, like it was cute. "Figured you'd be managing a coffee shop by now." He laughed like it was just good fun. The others nearby watched closely. I turned, removed his hand from my shoulder with a light touch. "It's not a hobby," I said. "And you know that." He blinked. "Do I?" I leaned in, just enough so only he could hear. "I also know about the $600,000 in debt you've racked up on the office expansion that doesn't exist. About the investor who backed out last month. About how you applied for a bridge loan through Halstead Capital 2 weeks ago." His smirk twitched. "You didn't get a rejection letter because of bad credit," I said. "You didn't get it because I made one call." His face paled slightly, like he'd been punched just beneath the ribs. He took a half step back. "You," he whispered. "Me," I said. Now he was truly quiet. Not the sarcastic, smug silence. Real silence, the kind you don't recover from quickly. I stepped past him, smiling politely at a relative who had just arrived. Behind me, Derek stood alone, his hands still in the air, eyes following me like he was watching his house catch fire through a window he couldn't open. He didn't know it yet, but this wasn't even the part that would haunt him. That came later. By late afternoon, the reunion had settled into its usual rhythm, kids playing tag near the hedges, adults sipping lemonade and pretending their marriages weren't crumbling. I watched it all like a guest at a play I used to be cast in. Then Liz rang the little cowbell, her quirky tradition to call everyone together for a group photo. Everyone shuffled toward the patio. I stayed at the edge, just out of frame. That's when Derek, still rattled, cleared his throat and spoke loud enough for the gathering to hear. "So, I guess we're all supposed to pretend like you didn't disappear for 3 years and suddenly show up like you own the place?" His voice had that brittle edge of someone trying to regain ground he'd already lost. I didn't look at him right away. Just tucked my sunglasses into my pocket, took my time stepping into the middle of the crowd. I looked around slowly, letting the silence draw tight like a drum skin. "I didn't disappear," I said. "I was just busy doing everything you said I couldn't." A few murmurs in the crowd. My father looked up from his plate for the first time. My mother's mouth opened slightly, unsure whether to interject. I turned to Derek. "But let's be honest, Derek," I continued. "You've always been more of a headline than a substance guy. Charm. Connections. Handshakes. You wore Dad's approval like a coat and never noticed it wasn't actually yours." He stepped forward. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but I do," I said louder now. "I know the truth behind your business. The fake projections. The loans you lied on. The fact that the company credit cards are maxed and your employees haven't been paid in 3 weeks. I know about the shell company you tried to funnel money through, and I know it failed." Gasps. Someone dropped a fork. "I know because I bought out the lender you begged for help. I watched you squirm for financing, not realizing the denial came from my name on the desk." I turned toward the rest of them. "And I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I wanted to see something. I wanted to know what would happen when the golden boy fell. When the mask slipped." Derek stood frozen, his face drained of color. My father's jaw was clenched, fists tight at his sides. My mother looked away. "You said I was too soft for the real world." I said, locking eyes with him. But softness didn't break me. It shaped me. And now? I'm not soft anymore. No one said a word. I looked around one last time. At the family that had ignored me, laughed at me, underestimated me. And then, calmly, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. The soles of my shoes tapped quietly against the flagstone as I walked to the car, the hum of conversation behind me hollow and fractured. I opened the driver's side door, slid in, and shut it with a soft click. Still no shouting. No chasing. Just silence. I could see them in the mirror, clustered near the grill, stunned faces frozen like a paused film. Derek hadn't moved. My father stood stiff as a statue, arms folded like he could hold his pride together if he just clenched hard enough. My mother had her arms wrapped around herself. For warmth? Or protection? I started the car. The engine purred, low and even. And then, before pulling away, I looked down at my phone. 3 missed texts. All from Derek. What the hell did you do? You ruined everything. You think this makes you the better man? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. By the time I got home, there were more. One from my father, short, sharp. We need to talk. One from my mother, long, rambling. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. He never told us things were that bad. Maybe if you'd said something sooner we could have. I don't know. We're still your family. Don't forget that. But I had forgotten. Not out of spite, not out of cruelty. I had forgotten what it felt like to need them. And once you forget that, their power disappears. I didn't reply to any of the messages that night. Instead, I poured a glass of scotch, stood on the balcony, and watched the city breathe. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindicated. I just felt done. Like I'd closed a door that had always been cracked open, letting in drafts and whispers. They weren't the ones holding me back all those years. I was. Clinging to their version of me. Waiting for an apology. Hoping they'd finally see me. They wouldn't. And now, they didn't have to. Because I'd seen myself. 2 days passed. I didn't reply to anyone, not Derek, not my parents. I let their words hang there in the digital void, where they could echo against themselves without ever reaching me. But on the 3rd morning, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't expected, Aunt Valerie. She was my mother's older sister. Quiet. Observant. The type who never raised her voice but always knew more than she let on. I hesitated, then picked up. Her voice was soft. I watched what you did at the reunion. I said nothing. She went on. It was long overdue. That caught me off guard. She sighed. Your brother's been playing king for too long. And your father, well, he's been building that throne for him since you were kids. I always thought someone should say something. I just never thought it would be you. Still, I said nothing. I didn't trust words yet. Then she said, You know, when you were little, I remember you building these little towers out of blocks in the corner. Not flashy, just solid. Methodical. You'd never get mad when they fell. You'd just start again. I always thought that said more about you than they ever gave you credit for. That made something tighten in my chest. Not pain. Not pride. Just recognition. I'm sorry I didn't speak up back then, she added. But I see you now. Just thought you should hear it from someone who was actually watching. I thanked her. Genuinely. It was the first kind word I'd heard from someone in my bloodline that didn't feel like it came with strings attached. Later that evening, Liz texted me too. You don't owe anyone an explanation. But if it means anything, a lot of people were rooting for you. Just too scared to say it aloud. Until now. It meant more than I expected. Not because I needed their approval, but because it reminded me that silence in families isn't always agreement. Sometimes it's just fear. Sometimes people are watching, waiting, hoping someone makes the first move. I didn't do it for them. But I was glad they saw it. I woke up the next morning to another message from Derek. But this one was different. I guess you think you won. But you didn't build anything. You just broke me. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I felt pity. Not even satisfaction. Just stillness. There was something eerie about the way he phrased it. Like he had forgotten all the years before, where he broke me in quiet, subtle ways. Joke by joke. Eye roll by eye roll. Every. You're too soft. Like a thumb pressed into clay, shaping me into something smaller. And now, with one reversal, he thought I was the destroyer? He didn't understand. He never would. Later that day, I got an email, not a message. An actual email. Paragraphs. Subject line. Closure? It read. I know you think I had it easy. And maybe I did. But you don't know what it's like to be put on a pedestal you didn't ask for. Everyone expected me to be perfect. Dad treated me like the second coming. I couldn't fail, even when I was drowning. You were always the one who got to feel. You got to be emotional. I had to be the rock. You think that's easy? I stopped halfway through. Not because it was wrong, but because it was so off. He framed his privilege as a burden. As if being constantly praised was some deep spiritual wound. He ended the message with, I'm not saying I'm innocent. But you didn't have to humiliate me. You didn't have to block the loan. That was cold, man. You're not who I thought you were. And for the first time in my life, I smiled at something he said. Because he was right. I wasn't who he thought I was. The little brother who used to take the blame for his broken stuff? Gone. The quiet one who apologized just to keep the peace. Dead. The soft boy who cried in his room after every family dinner, hoping one day someone would stand up for him. Buried. I didn't respond to the email. Not out of cruelty, but because I knew he wasn't looking for healing. He wanted to erase the scoreboard. Pretend this was a draw. A misunderstanding. But it wasn't. This wasn't about revenge. This was about letting him sit in the silence I had lived in for decades. The silence of being unseen. Of being doubted. Of being disposable. I did something I hadn't done since I was a kid. I printed the email. Folded it. Slipped it into a drawer in my desk. Not to keep the pain, but to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. That yes, this really happened. That I'd endured it, survived it, and outgrown it. That night, I walked to my closet and took out a photo. It was the last picture we ever took as a family before I left. Thanksgiving. Everyone smiling. Me in the corner, half cut off, holding a plate. I burned it. No drama. No speech. Just flame and ash and release. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about closing the book without needing a final chapter written by someone else.